Thank you, everybody here, both at MIPIM in the room, but also joining us on the live stream. Pleasure to have everybody here, and really interesting to get your views as well on this topic, which is looking at capital flows, but also at winning cities. For those who don't know me, my name's Richard Betts. We run a series of these events, around 80 a year, focused on different hot topics. We're also at Expo Real and here at MIPIM running a program dedicated to the sort of hot topics, key sectors within the industry. So great to have us with you here. We've also got a fantastic panel. Let's just start with introductions. So let's start with you, Pertti, a quick introduction of yourself and the company.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Pertti Vanhanen. I'm a CEO for Cromwell in Europe, and Cromwell is a listed property company, investor and manager down in Sydney, and we have some 7.8 billion euros assets under management. In Europe, we have teams on the ground in 12 different countries.
Great, thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you. My name's Gail Mayhew. I'm the Managing Director of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Pool's new urban regeneration company, which is called BCP FuturePlaces. It's an innovative new municipal stewardship company working to level up and make great places in England's South Coast region.
Great, thanks very much. Simone.
Thank you, Richard. Simone Pozzato. I'm a Managing Director at Hines. Hines is a family business still these days. We manage around 90 billion of dollars of real estate across the globe. We are about 700 individuals in Europe, and we manage around 30 billion here in Europe of euros. And actually, I run the Hines European Core Fund, an open-ended vehicle, which is about 3 billion in size, invested in 10 countries in Europe.
Great, thank you. And Ahmed.
My name is Ahmed Shalaby. I am CEO and Managing Director of Tatweer, Misr. We are a real estate development company based in Egypt. We started 8 years ago, and right now we are developing 6 million square meters of land in Egypt in 4 different destinations. We are specialized in mega mixed-use urban developments. Currently, we achieved 28 billion Egyptian pounds as volume of sales, about 1.8 billion US dollars, and we have like 10,000 clients currently. Thank you.
Great, really, so we've got a really interesting panel here, lots of different experiences, both in terms of the cities, but also in terms of development and the investor and development side. Maybe let's just pick up a little bit on perhaps some of the capital flows just initially, Pertti, because I know you're also just back from Australia. But what are you seeing in terms of the capital flows and the outlook for that over 2022?
Well, I think, Richard, outlook just changed 2.5 weeks ago as the Ukraine war started. But still, what we see and what I heard down there, as well as in Singapore, that there's plenty of dry powder, i.e. equity, available to be invested in real estate. Of course, some of that will come to Europe, but also goes to the APAC and elsewhere. So I see that at the moment that there's equity available, there's a financing available, and there's an appetite for real estate at the moment. Although people and investors are a little bit looking for how to play this game going forward when the Ukraine crisis may take longer than expected. So there's a kind of thought process ongoing at the same time as there's equity available.
Okay, good. And it would be good to get your perspective, Simone, as well. And also maybe some of those challenges in terms of risks, whether or not things like interest rate rises, anything like that, are potentially going to impact on capital, and especially potentially looking at Europe, let's say.
Sure. Well, I think last year was a record year in both in the US and in Europe in terms of returns. We've seen the US Odyssey Fund returning 30% in average last year, unseen before, right? And the same in Europe has been a record year. So definitely investors continue to pile on real estate, also because real estate continue to do relatively well compared to equities and fixed income. And so real estate remain a growing allocation. Then, I think everything changed, or a lot changed for us since the ECB and the Fed decided to start to move interest rate and tackle the inflation problem, right? A lot of political pressure to do that. And I think it was really interesting to see last week that the ECB kept on firm on the agenda of rising interest rates despite the conflict in Ukraine. So that means that I think this year will be a year of transition where real estate might be a winner at the end or not. Who knows? I think it will still be a good year for real estate, but we'll see what happens when interest rates will start to rise and people will feel it in the cost of financing. And returns will need to adjust also because last year was a record year. So this year we'll get to see more normal returns that you can expect from real estate rather than 2021 recovery from COVID. So I'll say we're well placed. It's up to us in the sector to keep the interest high and keep on delivering on the performance without going into GFC type scenarios of hype.
Yeah, no, sure. And Ahmed, it'd be interesting to get your perspective. Egypt, obviously, here at MIPIM with, with a big contingent, lots of interesting projects. What's your perception, I suppose, at the moment of institutional capital, international capital, and how have you seen that develop in terms of, let's take over the last 5 years in terms of Egypt, and where do you see that heading?
I think Egypt is currently witnessing a very rich period of economic stability and political stability. And both together are resulting in a huge flow of capital to Egypt. Egypt launched a huge program for developing new cities. Currently, we are witnessing one of I think the major urban developments that is happening anywhere in the world. It's happening in Egypt. 61 new cities are under development in different stages. 24 of them are already developed. 17 are representing the fourth generation smart cities, and more to come, 20 more to come. So what I'm trying to say that Egypt is providing a huge opportunity for real estate development. Last year alone, we witnessed, the last quarter actually, we witnessed the flow of $400 million from Abu Dhabi Capital through a Dar acquisition to Sadiq, one of the mega real estate developers in Egypt. In the same period, we witnessed $100 million coming from another fund in Abu Dhabi for Aura developments by Gemini, by Naguib Sawiris. So I think Egypt is very attractive. Egypt is offering mega opportunities, whether in the different sectors of the real estate, education, health, residential, first home, second homes. So the opportunities are there. And I think maybe the current situation might be even more helpful for Egypt because we are witnessing more capital flows coming to Egypt, especially from the Gulf countries, not from Europe. Unfortunately, maybe Europe will come next, but from the Gulf country, we are witnessing huge capital flows to Egypt.
Okay, that's really interesting. And I wanted to come to you, Gail. I mean, you mentioned there, Ahmed, about smart cities and those kinds of things. How important is that, because you're obviously looking at it from a completely different perspective in a way, Gail. How important is that sort of smart city side, and becoming I suppose, a winning city in terms of investability? What's your perspective?
Thank you. I mean, I think one of the critical things that we're trying to do is actually work as an intermediary between the capital flows and the placemaking. That's the fundamental intention of a public authority getting involved, setting up a stewardship entity such as we've done. The critical thing is the long-term perspective. We're trying to lock into patient capital. We're looking at locking into very long-term funding horizons to begin to try to provide, I suppose, at a financial level, this is about creating an absolute value proposition. It's also about looking at active investments so that we're actually really managing the way that place interacts with the occupiers in an innovative and different way to how, certainly in the UK, funding has moved into the regeneration space in recent years. I mean, we're very, very conscious of the need to interact with a new wave of entrepreneurial occupiers within the space. So, I mean, some of this really, I think, is very germane to this year's MIPIM, where we're looking at ESG very heavily. What does that actually mean in practice and in terms of these very different place offers around the world? I would say there will be a single central core to this, which is the long-term absolute value and making your money work really hard.
Okay, good. It would be good just to pick up that, and let's start with you, Simone, because I know that Hines has been doing a lot of work, particularly in Italy, around this, and including that placemaking side and involving sustainability, and also that long-term element that both Ahmed and Gail have mentioned there. So it would be interesting to get your perspective of that, and particularly, I suppose, what you've set out to do there in terms of the sort of developments in Italy.
Yeah. Well, let me start with sustainability, because I think it's very interesting. I think right now we finally have an opportunity in sustainability. For a lot of years, it's been a tick the box exercise for many investors, especially the Dutch, the German, I say that the most sophisticated we have in Europe. And right now they are starting to see that sustainability is linking to financial performance, because you cannot really sell a trophy asset if it's not sustainable. It doesn't tick the box, and that means a discount on pricing, right? So the biggest opportunity in Europe today is about turning brown into green. And it seems like everybody's saying the same thing. The reality is that how you do it is really what makes a difference. And really, I think the project that we have in Milan, which is outside my fan, is a one-off, but it's very interesting, is exactly starting from that. This area is very famous in Milan as the former Falk iron industry factory. It's a huge site. Not a very nice one today, but very strategic in terms of location, where Hines has done the horizontal zoning for 1 million square meter, and then will develop a portion of the project. And I think in there, it's going exactly in the right direction, where it's becoming a kind of show of technology and competencies on placemaking, so mixing the social uses. There will be student housing, senior housing, offices, retail, but not the kind of 100,000 square meter shopping center, but retail needed by the community. So the social aspect, but then of course you try to use the technology to deliver that sustainable solution. We're talking about solar panels, geothermal, and really wood. So all the kind of ingredients that are already there. I think a lot in sustainability today is using what is already there and combining it into the real assets, right? The very good guys today at sustainability are those that combine the technologies, which is the most difficult thing, I think. I don't know, Gail, I'm not a developer. I work for a developer, but I'm not a developer.
Pertti, did you want to pick that up?
Sorry,
in terms of I suppose the impact of ESG, those kinds of things, and also that sort of longer term strategic view about place as well in terms of winning cities.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as what I have said earlier, that ESG should be as natural for everyone in real estate as breathing or walking. So I think that there has been some greenwashing earlier. And I think a lot of investors and fund managers, institutional investors and everybody, developers and so forth, starts to really understand that we need to do much more than we have done. It's not only the energy measurements or solar panels, it's much more. And one thing what we have been doing and will do more, we are investing into the wooden buildings. Those buildings are made on wood, timber, and that is really the future for a number of locations. So that is something very interesting. And then about the winning cities and locations. So I think it's a very tricky to identify those cities that are kind of lost they kind of vibes during the pandemic, more than temporary. I mean, if you think about London, for example, it is really the city where the people want to be. Some people moved out during the pandemic, or in the peak of the pandemic, but now they are returning, and a lot of companies are establishing their headquarters, and a lot of offices are still developed, and so forth. So why is that? That's of course a key question, Richard. So that there's an infrastructure, first of all. Then you have a city vibes. You have educated people. You have the whole society where the young and old elder people, they want to work and live, and then you have good job opportunities. etc., etc. So that is really what I see, that all those cities that they were categorized as winning cities prior to pandemic, basically I don't know if other panelists recognize that any of those have really lost their kind of momentum. There are new ones coming, like we heard in Egypt and elsewhere, but these are they're like Paris and Amsterdam's and Stockholm's and so forth, what we believe that are the places to be in the future as well.
Okay, good. And Ahmed, it would be interesting to pick that up, both the sort of ESG side of it, wellness, and how influential that is in, particularly in the Egyptian markets, but also it would be interesting, to see how these developments in terms of either city quarters or whole cities, I suppose, embracing that and also being more investable, but following Gail as well, attracting talent to them. Does that then require, are there universities being put in place?
Yes.
What's happening as a mix?
It's an interesting topic, actually. I ran into a report yesterday, a recent one by a group from Germany called Statista. It's talking about the Global Business Index for cities. And for sure, I was looking for Cairo. And the good news that Cairo is ranked 176 out of 200 cities around the world. But the best news is Cairo ranked number 1 in Africa in the Global Business Index. It takes 4 elements into evaluation, and actually most of them are around ESG. It's talking about society, about economy, about environment, and about charisma. So I think it's good that the awareness is there. We are in Egypt, we are now, especially now in the last 4 or 5 years, totally aware of the importance of sustainability and the importance of smart developments. The government adopted the concept of smart cities development for all the 4th generation new cities, and this is huge, like the new administrative capital, Al Alamein city, Galala city, and so on, more than 17 new cities. Even us as a private developer, we are adapting the concepts of sustainable, smart, and happy communities within our developments. And I love the word placemaking, because this is actually what we are doing as real estate developers. So we are trying to integrate the whole elements together along with the different uses. Like, for example, we are developing a university and schools within one of our development. We are bringing New Jersey Institute of Technology from the US to open a branch campus. One of the requirements that they're gonna focus on entrepreneurship education, and they're gonna have a data center that collect all the data from our developments to make sure that we are running the developments and we are using the smart infrastructure that we invested in and running the developments in a way to save money. So we are trying to create better life and saving more money in property and facility management. So I think the idea of placemaking, adapting the sustainability measures, adapting the smart measures, and also the happy community concepts is really important, and it will make a huge difference in the life of our people and the life in the world in general.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And is the institutional capital also of the same mind? So is that what they're actively looking to invest in? What's your sense of that, Pertti or Simone?
Start. Thanks. So definitely yes. So in a number of countries, institutional investors are basically, they have a kind of luxury to be in the position that they can show the way, so to say, for the smaller investors and for the society. And also, if you think about the pension funds, for example, so the pension funds are basically, they are there for the policyholders, and policyholders are actually individuals like ourselves here in the room. So, and the younger generation, especially the younger generation, is pushing these organizations to be more and more environmental friendly, more and more ESG. And I think that we quite often forget that it's not only sustainability, like you said, that happiness and all that, but I think that E is quite obvious for everyone. S is something that people are missing often. And I mean, from our perspective, this has been a great test, this Ukraine war, as we have investments and people in Poland, Slovakia, and Czechs, and we've been able to help them. They are helping the people, the Ukraine people, refugees, massively. We have given them like 1 day per week as a free day with a full salary to help those people. So S is much more difficult to measure and get it in. And then the G is, of course, good governance. And that's also where the institutional investors are showing the way. So I think that institutional investors have adopted, and they are showing the way, and especially the Dutch, German, and Nordic institutions are on top of this. I also have seen in other parts of the world that some institutions, sovereign wealth funds and so forth, they are still far away from the ESG strategies, and they are like they are still picking up with that. So maybe I stop there. Sorry.
No, that's good. Simone, did you have anything to add to that one?
Well, I totally agree with Pertti. I think there's another way of looking at things that makes it even more, I think, practical. If you think about all the component of a real estate investment, you think about the equity. Equity wants sustainable investment these days at different levels. It can be impact or just sustainable, but need to be there. Debt is cheaper if you're running a sustainable strategy because they give you a small discount on green assets. Insurance is cheaper because insurers are really focused on that now, and the risk of flooding, the risk of fires, they really look into the materials, and the operational costs are cheaper. So the tenant occupational costs are lower at the end of the day. So this is where, and then of course there is the topic of liquidity and exit price and how many buyers you will have out there buying a non-sustainable asset these days. So overall, I think there are some investors in Europe that are far advanced in the analysis, and they're keeping pulling the strengths of this equation. But I think the others will follow if they want to act in the European market. And ultimately, we are starting to see more and more. I start to see at Hines, at least, a lot of European capital going to the US, coming up with ideas, asking for GRESB sustainability certificates to US managers, and you need to adapt, if you want their money. And ultimately, that moves things.
Yeah. Can I just add quickly that I think, Richard, we should not forget that governments and local regulators are starting to play much more and more important role here. We know that what is happening in France, tightening regulation and requirements for the ESG, the whole SFDR kind of things in European fund management industry, and also the good governance approaches. So even that whatever we do and we plan as an industry, we still have other counterparties like, sorry, not meaning you, but that who are setting the bar, and they are increasing the bar, and that's quite right, and we need to follow that.
Yeah, the regulation certainly in the European context is going to continue ramping up over this year for certain. There's a lot of interesting things coming through. Gail, it'd be interesting to get your perspective. You mentioned there about the long-term aims, but I suppose what are some of the things that you're actually initiatives maybe that you're actually putting in place to try and achieve that, so that there's a sense of what it actually means on a granular level rather than just ideas? What are some of the things that actually help create that feeling of space and place and collaborative work, I suppose?
I think centrally, one of the things that I think is actually very immediately important, actually in line with your points about what standard we're being set by regulators and what standard we're imposing on ourselves to meet. So one of the things that I slightly struggle with is at the area level of scale, there isn't actually an acknowledged global standard on actually what good, sustainable whole quarters look like. So one of the things that we're working on at the moment is trying to work with influencers within the UK market around what a neighbourhood-wide standard of sustainable ESG, healthy placemaking might look like. So that's one of our commitments, is trialling that exercise and working with partners on the investment side and with government to look at how that might play out. And then, I mean, to your point about actually, how we, on a project by project basis are working. There's process issues as well as place issues. We're absolutely committed to working with communities, with residents, with stakeholders to very clearly understand what they're wanting out of place before we start to plan and impose master plans on them. So there's a lot of innovation also going around actually how that process towards placemaking is put into action. Just come from a meeting with the RTPI, the British Landscape Institute, and I mean, we're just challenging our own professional practices at the moment because it's much more joined up, much more cross-industry, much more cross-professional. And I think that's actually one of the big bits of learning and putting together our own team. We're drawing on a much wider skill set than straightforward just development, straight planning. We've got investment expertise in there and consultative behavioural practices beginning to kind of come in at a much earlier stage in project inception. So I think that's beginning to sort of. I think the other thing I'd just like to say. I mean, I think there's been a huge watershed because of COVID as well, and I think that has challenged so much of what we know to be true about locational dynamics. So we're working that through at the moment. We don't have the answers, but I think that's going to be a really big one for us.
And was that much of a change in terms of? Was there a change in perception about post-COVID, whether or not that made any changes in terms of the planning or the strategies there for you, Ahmed, in terms of your developments? Or
Actually, one of the things that we're very positive about Egypt in the last 2 years, Egypt was one of the very few countries in the world who kept growth in the GDP. Because actually Egypt dealt with the COVID, I believe, in a very smart way about balancing between the economy and the safety. So we never have a close down in Egypt during the last 2 years. We kept going and moving. All construction sites kept working all the time, so we never stopped, whether on government level or private sector level. So I think this has kept the economy growing and kept the growth in the GDP. Now we are talking about the Prime Minister announced that the first half in the fiscal year 2021-2022 witnessed 9% growth in the GDP, and that's toward the target, the annual target of 6.2 to 6.5, which is really good recovery from the pandemic. During the pandemic, we were talking about 4%, 4.5%, which is really interesting to see. So I think Egypt managed to get out from the pandemic with the least possible losses, whether in economy or in safety and health sector. And, suddenly we all felt the pandemic is over. So, so I think we were right. So,
well, I'll touch something wooden in that. Just to make sure that is the case. That's interesting. It would be good to get, maybe from you, Simone, has your view on what makes a winning city, what makes something that you would want to invest in, has that changed post-pandemic? Has it made a change or like Pertti, are the same cities, the ones that were always on your investment map, or has it introduced some new ones? Have you changed any of your investment criteria based on that?
Yeah, actually, I think that the two microtrends we experience in Europe are the two bigger things that we take into account in my strategy I run are tech and aging population. These are the two main things because we're a long-term investor, and these are the two main things that are changing the shape of real estate, I think. Tech is interesting because it's about attracting young talents, population that wants work and live in a city. And I think Dublin is a very good example. We call it the institutional tech in Dublin, the Facebook, the TikTok, the Google. And you keep building in Dublin, and the supply is still not keeping the pace of the demand. And so tech as a driver means that, where there's young population, there's growth. When those people are 25 today, they will be 35 in 10 years. They will have kids. They will buy a house. They will buy a car. And therefore, you see economic growth there. So tech driving jobs is driving growth over time. And it's not just Dublin. You see it in Paris. You see it in Amsterdam. Unfortunately, London lost a little bit, but London was so big I think the damage is still minor. And then the other one is the demographics, the senior, right? And I think we are going into a world where senior living is institutionalizing, and senior might want to move a little bit out. So I see the cities of the future maybe be less inclusive for senior people, or more, because cities like Paris, like London, are so expensive. So there's a kind of push out of more senior people, senior communities, and the cities are becoming more this center of gravity where everything is a bit expensive, is a bit dynamic, but there are stages in life, right? So I think demographics, the dynamic of the demographics in the city are really important. The people who came back to London are not the 60 plus, from my point of view, are maybe the 35, the 45, the 60 plus, move to Devon or move to Kent or move to Cornwall, and they're happy there, I think. Maybe I'm wrong, But I think that the tech is moving demographics and is a factor to watch in Europe these days.
Or they might have moved to Bournemouth and Poole.
Absolutely, yeah, traditionally. Well, I mean, really, this is kind of my big point in the UK. I think you are seeing new markets emerging in the regional geography of the whole of Britain, in fact, been so London-centric for so long. And I think there's a really exciting move towards smaller cities and the large towns which offer the quality of life. But, I mean, I think that's not just older people. I mean, we're seeing in Bournemouth, Christchurch Poole, we've got a lot of young people, who go to university there. It's got one of the outstanding faculties for
student housing, of course,
animation. But it's actually capturing those people into our local economy long term.
That's the challenge after university.
Yeah, this is why we need sort of great green developments like your ones. Hold them there.
No, I think that's interesting as well. I mean, and is there something then around? And feel free to come back on this, Simone, but is there something around that long-term investment, Pertti, where actually if you've got that sort of strategy that Simone was talking about, where, yes, you're investing in these ones that have got the technology, the tech aspect, have got a growing population that then are going to require schooling, are going to require student housing, are going to require senior living, that you're actually investing in a long-term strategic investment into that city, even though you may be at that point making a small investment?
Yeah, I think that what we've been, with our research and investment strategy team, we've been talking about is really there's a lot of public debt now in the cities and for the governments after the pandemic. And there's still demand for, as we have heard, there's still demand for different type of facilities, varies country by country, how the elderly care, for example, has been organized, can be private, can be public, and then the question is that if the public money is not available, how much flexibility there is for investors like ourselves to jump in and kind of replace those kind of traditionally municipalities and city authorities' investments and have be there in those cities really long term. I think affordable housing is one of the good example in the UK, that basically private money is replacing more or less, not totally, but quite a lot public money as well. And then I wouldn't be surprised that elderly care is one of those as well. But what I see also, I would be surprised, as we have been talking about this ourselves, that universities, schools, daycare centers, they are already, in some countries, they are totally investable assets. And you can make a 20 years, 30 years leases with a city, and basically you can then think about that. Of course, it's a low yielding, but it's like a bond type of an alternative for the bond investment. So definitely we are looking for those, and actually we have some conversations ongoing at the moment.
Okay, good. Does anybody have any questions? If so, now's the time to ask, but I can leave that with you, and if you have one, just let me know or shout it out, and we'll try and deal with it. Just because I'm keen, given that it's MIPIM, to make sure we finish kind of 5-7 minutes before the half hour, so that if you've already booked a meeting for the half hour, you can get to it.
So, Richard,
yes, go ahead.
If you allow me, I have just a comment on the winning cities or winning countries concept. I think one of the major attractiveness for Egypt, especially after I heard what you have said, guys, is the population. It's a strong population growth. We are talking about like 70% of the country is under the age of 40 or maybe the age of 35. Huge population growth with huge demand for the different sectors, education, health, facilities, everything. So I think this is one of the main drivers for the strong growth that is happening in Egypt and for the attractiveness, especially for the real estate sector. On the other side, Egypt should be very attractive for the senior people from Europe, especially from Europe, because Egypt is enjoying a nice weather all year round. Cost of living is very decent. I think what we miss in this, good health facilities. If we manage to develop good health facilities in especially beach destinations like Hines, which is an hour away from Cairo, I believe, not because we are developing there, but I personally, that's one reason, but I really personally believe that Hines should be a destination for senior European to come and live in Egypt, not come as a tourist, no, to come and live, enjoy the weather, enjoy the decent cost of living, which is compared to Europe is very fair, and also enjoy all the facilities that are there in Egypt. What we miss is proper health facilities to make the formula complete. So I think it's part of our job as real estate developers to invest in health facilities too. We invest in education, we invest in residential, we need to invest in health, we need to attract institutional investors from Europe to invest in health and facilities for senior people. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, actually, you're beginning to see as well in the UK, people, particularly if it's dementia care or those kinds of things, that actually moving to Asia, to places like that, so that because there's a different style of care there. So it's interesting, and I think they're
Egypt is closer than Egypt.
That's for certain. But I mean, the growth in senior living and healthcare is going to be huge, I think, as well. That's great. So it will be interesting just to get, I suppose, everybody's kind of last takes on, let's say, either, what makes an investable city for you, what makes it a winning city. Yes, let's do that. What makes it a winning and investable city? So why don't we start with you, Gail, and you can give us your perspective on what you're trying to build, and then we can judge whether that's a winning or.
Okay, so tough call, but it's quality of life. Ultimately, it's all about quality of life and a place that works for all generations. That's really where we're trying to be.
Okay, great, Pertti.
Yeah, quality of life, but also that it's you have a decent size of commercial real estate market, so that there's a liquidity. There are other investors as well, and also that growth forecasts for that city, the population and all that, the demographics are there. And then, of course, we need to think about all the educational systems and infrastructure and all those kind of things. But quality of life and decent size, those are, of course, good starting points.
Great, thanks. Ahmed.
I think demographics first, because this is the main driver for us as real estate developers, with all the demographic needs, and then quality of life for sure. Which for me, quality of life includes the smart and sustainable and happiness concepts. All the concepts could fall under the quality of life.
Great, Simone. Last to you.
Gail might not like it, but I think it's about concentration of GDP, concentration of talents. That is an important thing. If you look at the national level, how much Paris, how much London, how much Milan are dragging at the national level. That's really important, because where there's talent, where there's concentration of wealth, there's need for real estate, right? I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Have you not had a Teams meeting in the
That's business.
Capitalist kicked in.
Capitalist talking.
I think it's time that you were invited both to Egypt and to Bournemouth and Poole. I think Great, thanks very much. Really interesting discussion. Thank you for joining us. It means everybody's got 10 minutes to be able to get to their next event, which is great. Thank you for joining us online. If you're interested in any of these other topics, I mean, we mentioned there student housing and senior living and healthcare. We've got sessions on student housing, senior living, healthcare, also impact, ESG, wellness and those kinds of things. So do feel free to look at those and join those sessions. They'll all be online as well. But thanks very much for joining us. And because we are here in person, it means for the first time in a long time, we can actually thank people, you for being here and our speakers for sharing their views by clapping, which is great. Thank you very much, everybody.